Hello, my name is Will Tesch, and thank you for allowing me to present today at the NAHDO Association, a concept called Composable Automation, what it means and how it can help interoperability and data standardization. My name is Will Tesch. I'm the CEO of HealthLX. I've been in the industry of enterprise integration, enterprise strategy for the better part of 30 years. I continue to think I'm a student of the healthcare industry because it's a big, old, ugly problem that has to be solved. And I'm proud to be right in the middle of it, solving for some of the most challenging scenarios in healthcare today. Look forward to sharing with you what we believe to be a novel and important approach to overall enterprise capabilities with enterprise interoperability. Over the last 40 plus or minus years, there's been ideas that have contributed to solutions oriented toward making sure applications can talk to each other. That's basically what interoperability means. Certainly applications talking to each other, but data moving between applications to each other is another way of viewing it. We believe in 2016, August of 2016, there was the introduction of an open source product, or a product that was introduced to the open source community called NiFi. Those familiar with NiFi know that it's a growing ecosystem inside the open source community. It originally came from the NSA, but that underlying technology has allowed us to look at interoperability differently, and notably different, because everything else prior to NiFi was written with a fair number of constraints in terms of agility and evolution, and you'll see what I get to in a minute. But all of this contributes to an idea which we believe is called composable automation. And some information on that is here. It's a type of platform architecture. All platform architectures are required to have four kind of fundamental ideas behind them. They should be simple. In other words, they should be describable with a certain amount of abstraction to what these platforms are capable of doing. They ought to be resilient. One aspect of the platform shouldn't shut the entire platform down. And the key here is that subsystems become very important to how the overall platform works. These subsystems could relate to any particular nuanced capabilities, as in fire processing, APCD, data constructs, as an example. They ought to be maintainable. This is probably the biggest challenge with platform architectures over the years. It's that they've developed independent of the management layer for CPU and memory, and overall platform architecture was so important that it impacted how one looked at building a platform. The platform also ought to be able to evolve. We know one thing for sure, in all the years I've been doing this, and the years that you have been doing this in the audience, you know that things change. Any number of things change, and the intent with the platform is to be modular, so you can accept those changes. So what is composable architecture? Gartner says composable architecture is a framework that enables organizations to rapidly build new and existing business capabilities, products, and services. If you've been in technology long enough, you could probably say, well, that sounds like programming languages as an architecture. Well, it's probably accurate. Automation. What is our definition of composable automation? Well, we believe that architecture is critical, and the approach to doing that is critical. But the automation means that you should have ideas like workflow design, operational oversight, and scalability core to that platform, hence composable automation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about workflow design, operational oversight, and not talk so much about scalability, because this is a time-constrained presentation. And more intently, I guess I'll just focus on workflow design. So workflow design implies that there are components that you can create into a workflow. Those components we call purpose-built components. And purpose-built components, in many ways, are similar to coding concepts that are configurable. These coding concepts, there have been ideas throughout the years like SOA architecture, like object-oriented programming. In some ways, these are the embodiment of the best of those ideas, where we have purpose-built components, meaning configurable code that can be assembled in such a way that once configured and assembled, you've got a workflow that's described from a business viewpoint. So we're going to be talking about business process management, business modeling, process modeling using our platform. And I'll show you that in a second. All of this is built upon the dimensions of a PBC: composable thinking, composable business architecture, and composable technology. So these PBCs, purpose-built components, once grouped together, solve for any number of healthcare challenges, and frankly, outside healthcare challenges. So we have components that are grouped together to solve for data management, if you would, for CMS initiatives like the Patient Access API, for vaccine reporting to states. So these components, we once assembled together, can solve for any number of use cases that our healthcare is challenged with solving. EHR integration. Not every EHR, not every Epic or Cerner implementation is like the next, right? So you have to have this ability to be nuanced in your workflow design to support any number of these healthcare challenges. And you have to look at the problem differently. And we believe once you look at it with a composable viewpoint, you can solve for it from a composable viewpoint and also automate for it. So this is just one screenshot of our workflow editor. And our workflow editor, what's essential here to point out is everything on the right side of that palette, all of those boxes with lines, those are all components. Those components are on the left-hand side in terms of like an inventory of components you can drag onto the palette and then configure once they're dragged onto the palette. This idea of assembly of business components to solve for any number of healthcare interop use cases is novel in its design. We're not familiar with anything in the market that's like this, but composable automation, composable architecture are still very new. We have been in production for since 2015 with our technology, so we're very excited about its future. The interoperability landscape, this is a quick and dirty picture. I guess it's colorful. It was probably not so much dirty, but anyways, it's definitely expresses at a colorful perspective the diversity of the challenges in the interoperability landscape. Some are driven by payers, some are driven by providers. There's code sets, all sorts of code sets that are necessary to be maintained and by the way, change and get added to. TEFCA's coming around. There's the APCD construct for all payer claims data set. But the point is, there's this wide diversity of challenges in the interoperability landscape. I'm not stating anything new. This has been around forever, since healthcare interop started having applications talk to each other. There's been the need for interoperability challenges. So the way they get solved is the novel approach that we think is tied to composable automation. So here's an example. Just a real quick example, and I could spend a lot more time than I'm going to spend on this, but it's rather simple. And these ideas, by the way, have been around forever. When you look at an implementation guide for how data should be communicated to a party, that implementation guide is published, it's produced, the idea that everybody will adhere to it. Everybody's adherence to an implementation guide is no better an example other than EDI. There's been EDI implementation guides for 40 years. And every one of those implementation guides has a document structure that has to be adhered to, but is never quite perfectly adhered to. So you have ingestion problems with those documents. That's no different than the APCD approach. You've got multiple payers believing they're solving for and they're agreeing to and they're auditable against an understanding of a construct that follows the implementation guide of that construct. PBCs, to take the ingestion problem alone, knowing that they're not going to perfectly match, we should transform those constructs to something that will match. That's what transformation PBCs with an automation platform allow for an aggregated canonical. So as much as each of those ingestion processes a payer, and those ingestion processes might be slightly different than the next, they all become validated and transformed to meet a canonical that's required for the state. Those boxes on the bottom kind of describe today's process at a very high level. I hope to talk more about this in Q&A, but the long and short of it is our approach to composable automation is not just ours, but it's a movement that's happening in the industry. If certain principles are adhered to, we believe that the industry can evolve quicker with more agility and be much more successful, as the healthcare industry needs successful implementations of interoperability. That's it. Thank you very much. I know I crammed a lot into this very short message. I'm looking forward to the Q&A. Thank you.